Last year, we were actually 12.5% less crime than 2019, the last year before COVID. But there's no question that some of these high-profile incidents, terrible attacks have gotten in people's heads and made the whole system feel less safe.
That man right there is the head of the New York MTA, one of the most corrupt agencies, not in the city of New York, not in the state of New York, but in the entire country and probably in the entire world. In fact, I believe this guy gets fan mail from African dictators that are just impressed with the amount of money that he is able to steal in a modern Western country. And guess what? He decided that he was going to tell the world that the New York City subways, perfectly safe. New York City subways, crime actually down, not up. So shut your stupid faces and stop complaining about crime. Honestly, if you're concerned about crime, it turns out that you're watching too much local news hysteria. It turns out you're falling for misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation that is being promoted by digital media influencers. Because when we look at the crime index, crime actually down, not up in the New York City subway. Now, of course, I've talked about this many a times, and this guy has no way to address and or counter it, but homicides are up dramatically in the New York City subways. In fact, more people have been killed in the last 5 years in the New York City subway system than in the previous 20 years. Also, assaults are up dramatically in the subways, as well as a bunch of other violent crimes. But it turns out, if you throw in some property crimes in there, and you factor in those crimes which represent a larger portion of the raw number, you end up with crime actually technically down, even though property crime is down, which shows you it's not about poverty and desperation, but violent crime is up. And by the way, that's the unadjusted numbers, because remember, the population of New York City is declining, so we actually have less people in the subways, and when you adjust the numbers on a per capita basis for the decrease in subway riders, even those property crimes are still up per capita. But don't let any of that information get in the way of this guy's good time, because crime down in the subway, totally safe, totally perfect, totally beautiful. And in fact, it's so safe in the subway that one of the chief people behind installing the congestion pricing, an activist who hates cars so much, she is the head of an organization that sued the state of New York in order to get congestion pricing implemented. Yes, this person's organization sued in favor of a tax, if you can believe it, was attacked in the New York City subway in just under a week after congestion pricing actually went into effect. And that's what we're going to break down today. But before I break that down, I do want to say my good friend, a friend of the channel, somebody that you might be a fan of, Devin Tracy, aka AIU, is currently raising money for his parents who lost their entire home in the California wildfires. It's absolutely devastating. Every inch of property that they have is burned out. So I would really appreciate, if you're a fan of his, if you donated in order to support his parents. Now, I know some of you don't know Devin, but he is a friend of mine, and I would appreciate it if you are able and willing, if you want to support him. And for those of you who don't like Devin or can't donate, no shade towards you. It's your decision, and I'm not trying to pressure you out of a dime. And now, let us get into this story. So we go to the New York Post, which starts this article with a very questionable, be careful what you wish for. A vocal proponent of the state's controversial congestion pricing plan, who is nudging New Yorkers into the city's troubled transit system, was attacked at a Manhattan station over the weekend. Layla Lobbyist, president of the City Club of New York, which sued Governor Kathy Hochul to implement the unpopular toll for motorists driving into Manhattan, said she was left bruised and battered after the Saturday afternoon attack at the 23rd Street station. So look, I know a lot of people out there in my audience like to say, you voted for this, no sympathy for you, and that is whether or not the person that we're actually talking about who was victimized has any indication that they voted for the policy that we're talking about. Again, it's just them living in a geographic area. It would be like me telling you, if you were suffering under the Biden administration, you voted for this because the country did vote for Joe Biden, and therefore, you are entitled to the suffering under his policies. However, in this case, this woman in particular not only voted for this, obviously, but she went out of her way to sue the governor in order to enforce a tax on other New Yorkers that she didn't like because of her anti-car ideology. And during the course of the lawsuit and her advocacy, she downplayed concerns about subway safety that a lot of people who had switched to driving were actually worried about, saying, no big deal, get in the transit system, you absolute dummies, it is perfectly safe, perfectly adequate. And she probably bought in to that MTA guy's propaganda about how there's no real crime problem in the subway, even though we've seen time and time again, people are getting killed at a much higher rate in New York City subway. That being said, I still don't root on the attack against this woman. I find the be careful what you wish for thing rather questionable, but make no mistake about it, this person not only voted for this, they were an activist for this, and they actually sued in order to force the governor into implementing this. So yes, she is in part the author of her own peril. So on X, formerly known as Twitter, she actually put out a post saying, today at around 3:30, I entered the subway station at 23rd Street and 5th Avenue. Following the attack, at the bottom of the first flight of stairs, an individual with a shopping cart began screaming at me and spat in my hair. So just so you guys know, it doesn't end there, but I'm just pausing right now so you guys can understand what happened. You have an activist, again, who sued the governor in order to tax drivers, in order to force people into the subway station. At 3:30 in the afternoon, she enters what is to be a populated subway station, and down the first flight of stairs, so very close to the surface, a homeless man with the shopping cart who was crazed decided to start screaming at her for no real reason, and then he spat on her, getting the spittle in her hair, much in the same way that she metaphorically spits on other New Yorkers by trying to raise their taxes in order to give money to the corrupt MTA. But again, it goes on, and also, in addition to that, I still don't want this person to be attacked in the subway. Let me be clear about that. Quote, I am shaken with a bruised ankle and a sore shoulder from being pushed into the wall, she said. This has been a distressing and painful experience. Police said Timothy Elliott was nabbed at the station and charged with assault and harassment. He was released on a desk appearance ticket, cops said. Hours after the attack, the $9 congestion toll went into effect, and the City Club put out a statement co-signed by Lobbyist praising the launch. So first of all, I apologize if earlier on in this video I misspoke related to the timeline. I said within the same week. It was actually the same day that the toll went into effect. This woman was attacked, but hours later at midnight when the toll went into effect, she and her organization co-signed a statement endorsing this particular policy. But things are about to get much, much worse, because it turns out this person, although she's been in New York City for a very long time, is from Paris, a Parisian. Lobbyist, a native Parisian who had lived in the Big Apple for 3 decades, has long been a rabble-rouser on transit issues in the 5 boroughs. The group she heads, the City Club, has been a strong proponent of congestion pricing, arguing that it will, quote, incentivize the use of public transportation to reduce congestion and improve air quality. Last year, the club was one of 2 groups that sued Hochul to implement an earlier version of the congestion pricing plan after the governor's office temporarily paused its rollout amid concerns it would put an unfair burden on many working class New Yorkers. Now, to be clear, the reason Governor Kathy Hochul decided to pause congestion pricing last year in July is due to the fact that the Democrats were looking at big trouble in the elections, and obviously New York moved far to the right. However, she didn't want this to be an issue that destroyed her party, so essentially she pretended to be on the side of 75% of New Yorkers who are against this program by pausing the program in order to help them out, and then implemented the tax after the election. So obviously that was a scam, and her rationale back then was a scam because guess what? New Yorkers are still struggling just as they were prior to the election. Now, of course, Lobbyist did not return the New York Post's request for comment on this particular attack. Obviously, it makes her look bad because this is a foreigner from Paris trying to change the way our city functions, trying to enforce new taxes on everyday New Yorkers, and of course, course, is telling people that the subway is perfectly safe when obviously it is not. The data shows that repeatedly. Who was attacked in the subway just prior to the price actually going into effect. Also, I want to point out that in addition to stupid congestion pricing, this also is correlated to bail reform, because here you have a psychopathic person with a rap sheet a mile long who physically assaulted a woman in the subway for no reason, who was given a desk appearance ticket. Again, this man is back out on the streets to attack another person. So we have bail reform and congestion pricing merging into one. The liberal hellscape is in fact real, and this person finally actually experienced the consequences of the policies that she voted for. Although, again, I would not wish this on my worst enemy because A, it's disgusting, and again, who wants to root for a woman to get physically assaulted in the subway outside of left-wingers when that woman happens to be a conservative? And for those of you who are saying, Sean, you're cherry-picking this story and you're using statistical facts related to crime to talk about how dangerous it is because you're somebody who hates public transit because you're a terrible person, I will just remind you guys, in case you're a bit confused, that I'm not the only one saying it. In fact, the head of the transportation union in New York, aka the people who represent the workers in the MTA, think that it is too dangerous right now to force people into the subway based on the amount of crime that they're experiencing as workers, and they don't want inflicted on average everyday people.
The MTA has long said 80% of revenue generated will go toward capital improvements, everything from enhancing accessibility to modernizing signals.
We're replacing all that track and power and structure that came in when FDR was the president, Franklin Roosevelt. All that is being replaced. Projects are being done on time and on budget. This is a new MTA.
In addition to that, and I will emphasize this time and time again, while I do believe congestion pricing will reduce traffic below 60th Street in Manhattan, there are also other consequences, negative consequences, unintended consequences. However, the worst consequence, humanly possible, is giving the MTA more money. Now, I have talked about how the signaling system in the train system, in the MTA system, is over 100 years old. Well, guess what? The head of the MTA, this absolute scumbag, is promising to finally, and I mean finally, think about replacing some of the outdated equipment from FDR's administration, and I believe he's actually talking about outdated equipment from when FDR was the governor of New York, not when he was the president of the United States, because that's how old this stuff is.
The MTA has long said 80% of revenue generated will go toward capital improvements, everything from enhancing accessibility.
In addition to that, they're also talking about making the subways more accessible to the handicaps. But the thing is, they already received $5.5 billion in order to do that back in 2019 when it was revealed that just 28% of MTA subway stations are accessible, have elevators for handicapped people in order to get in. And guess what? They were going to pay for just 70 elevators with that $5.5 billion, meaning that each one costs about $76 billion to start. We know from this Curbed article that when the starting price is around $70 million, it balloons up to over $100 million per elevator. Again, let me just say that one more time for those of you who are hard at hearing. $100 million per elevator. Money was appropriated back in 2019, $5.5 billion in order to build them. But for some reason, we're supposed to believe that now, with this new money from this new congestion toll, they're going to finally start work on those projects, which begs the question, where did that previous $5.5 billion go? Obviously, this is one of the reasons why this guy gets letters from African dictators admiring the way he runs a kleptocracy. Anybody in favor of giving this agency any additional money is in fact insane. You are mad, you're crazy, and you're the problem. And anybody who tells you that the subway is perfectly safe, let me force you in there against your will, even though a subway fare is definitely cheaper than the tolls that you already paid prior to the congestion pricing being in. Obviously, there's something going on. If it was safe, clean, efficient, and the best way to get around, you wouldn't have to force all these different people to do it. Obviously, when people have the option, when people want to be able to avoid avoid this, they do everything and anything for them to do so. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think, not only about this activist being attacked, but how they're saying they're going to spend the money on projects that they supposedly were already working on for the past 6 years in the city of New York. Is this standard? Is this logical? Is this sensible? Or am I right? And this is just totally crazy. As usual, if you like the video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a congestion pricing activist being attacked in the subway that she advocates for. Till next time.